you have questions about how much is my product cost, what are the factors that actually contribute to my cost of my food product, how do I determine that, and what goes into it? Well, I'm going to give you the 7 factors to think about when you start figuring out the price of your food product. Damien from Marketing Food Online. And again, as I mentioned in the introduction, I'm going to give you the 7 factors, the most important parts to your food product, so you could sit down and really determine how much does my product cost, so I can figure out how much I can either wholesale it for or how much can I retail it for and sell it online and everything in between. So really quick, before we do that, if you are new to the channel and this is your first, of course, I'm going to plug, you got to hit that subscription button. We've got over 700 videos absolutely free showing you how to create food products and food businesses from scratch. I've been doing this for over 12 years now, and I've been in the food business for nearly 30 years. Wow, it's been a while. So yes, definitely hit the subscription button, and we've got all kinds of free resources. Also, if you need any consulting, I do offer a one-on-one, 1-hour phone consultation. That is what I have available, and I'll click a little link down in the description. There'll be a link there for you to check out that consulting service as well. So let's jump right into it. Okay. So how do I determine the price of my product? That's a great question. Now, really quick tip from someone who's done it and been there and I've experienced this. Number 1, when you first start your food business, it's always going to be the most expensive for you to create a food product. Now, what in the world does that mean? When you first start this business, and most of them are started from home, I can tell you, and most of them are started with a low budget as well, you always don't have enough money up front to buy your ingredient in bulk, okay? So any of the ingredients that go into creating your food product are always going to be the most expensive, because I can probably tell you most of you are probably buying those ingredients at your local grocery store. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can actually do that perfectly fine, perfectly legal, and all that good stuff. But when you buy a 5-pound bag of sugar and you could buy a 50-pound bag of sugar, the price varies greatly, okay? If you can buy 2 pounds of nuts because you're making a trail mix and you can buy 50 pounds of nuts at a different price point, well, the per pound price is obviously going to be a lot better. So that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. But just keep that in mind that when you first start, don't get discouraged because you're like, oh my goodness, this costs a lot to make. How am I going to make any money? Your margins will be very small up front, but you also need to test your product. You need to get it out there and see if it really sells, if there's actually a place in the market for it. So that is something else that's, again, you're experimenting. You're kind of rolling the dice. You're just checking it out and see if it works. So buying it locally and creating small little tiny batches to see first, always the best bet because you don't have to invest that much money. Now, Damien, when are we getting to the list? Right now. So number 1, the ingredients. You want to make sure when you create a food product, obviously every food product is a recipe. At the end of the day, that's what everyone is. All of the recipes that we work on here, we have cookies, bundt cakes, and chocolate pretzel rods. Everything creates is some type of recipe, right? So every single bit of ingredient in that recipe, you need to know the cost of the recipe, okay? The batch that you're creating, you need to determine how much does a batch cost. And I always use this as an example because it's super easy to do. Let's say chocolate chip cookies. They have several ingredients. Doesn't have a lot of stuff. Flour, sugars, maybe some milk, brown sugar, maybe some eggs, whatever it may be. Now, when you create that recipe, it's going to create a certain quantity of product. Let's say 2 dozen cookies, okay? So I put together my recipe and I mix it all together and I make 24 cookies. How much does that cost for me to make in ingredients? We're just starting with the ingredients, okay? So you determine, let's just say, 1 cup of sugar, 1 cup of flour. You're about $2. Let's just say it costs $2 to make 2 dozen cookies, okay? Great. Now, you want to keep in mind as your business grows, because you know that it will, because that's obviously why you're in business, you are going to have a bigger dream when you first start than when you're in the end. So you want to make sure that you kind of think outside the box and say, you know what, I'm going to grow this business. How can I scale this recipe? So from that singular recipe, keep in mind that down the road, you may be doing 5 batches at the same time. So you may be producing 5 sets of 2 dozen cookies, right? So as you do that though, that is where you need to calculate how much is it costing you, because little by little, you'll be able to purchase ingredients in a bigger quantity, making it cost less for you to produce, okay? Ingredients. Number 2, packaging. I'm not talking about labels yet. Not yet. That's number 3. Packaging. How are you going to package it? Now, let's just, again, say you're making cookies, okay? You're going to put those cookies in a cookie box and maybe probably even a cookie platter, and then you're going to shrink wrap it. Like one of my videos that I showed everybody how we actually seal our cookies up here. We have a platter, put the cookies on, seal it up, and then it goes into a box, okay? So, packaging. How much does that platter cost you? How much does the cookie box cost you? How much does everything as far as the actual package going to cost for your product? So, for instance, I did this in a couple of videos ago. This one here, I have a bag. Not the label. Forget the label right now. The bag itself, this bag cost me about 20 cents, okay? All right, it's a resealable bag. You can heat seal it on the top. It stays fresh. So that's the packaging for the trail mix, all right? Okay, got that down. Next up, number 3, your label. Now that's a little different because why? 2 factors. Are you printing it or are you having somebody print it for you? Now, as I mentioned in my other videos, and as we always do, we make our own labels because it's cheaper. So which label are you going to put on the container? And how much is it costing you to make the label? Because the label is part of the packaging, and that's a factor in your costs, okay? So you want to try to make a really nice label, but you don't want to make it too expensive. I personally would never have anybody print labels for us because it's just cheaper to do it here in our facility. So the label. Now, what really contributes to the cost of the label, Damian? Well, ink. Ink, the type of label it is, the finish of the label, the size of the label, how many are you buying at the same time? So all of those factors come into play, and that's going to contribute to the cost of your label, which goes on the package, which holds your product. Okay, number 4. This is a big, big question, and a lot of people get stumped. And when you're first starting, I personally say, do not factor it in because it's very difficult to factor in when you're first starting. Labor. And you're probably thinking, well, Damian, how does that work? How could you possibly not factor in labor? Well, when I first started my business, it was about 3 or 4 years into it before I even began to pay myself. Because every dollar I made, I had to put back into the business, and I didn't pay myself. Now, the good thing is, if you want to start this business, and most food businesses are from home, start it on a small scale. Part-time, don't dive into it full-time. Just do it part-time, okay? Don't factor in your labor because it's way much more difficult because when you're at home, your costs are completely different than when you're in a commercial facility. Your lights that are above me here, your rent, whatever that may be, your insurance, all of that stuff is totally different when you're not doing it from home. So forget about the labor when you first start, okay? But down the road, the labor will be a factor in considering your price. That's a whole nother video, and I'll have to explain to you in detail how you can factor that in. Now, some people may ask, well, I'm going to use a commercial kitchen. Good, that's great. Now, if you do use a commercial kitchen, you would need to figure out how much of your product, let's just say trail mix, how much trail mix can I make? What's the maximum amount of trail mix I can make if I rent a commercial kitchen for 2 hours and it's costing me $200? Because the amount of bags you make divided by that 200 is going to be factored into each bag. So if you're renting a commercial facility and you can put out 200 bags, $200, that's about $1 a bag roughly, right? Because you're renting that place and that is your labor. That is going to cost you the amount of time you are going to do it, not if you're going to have someone else work with you. So if you're renting a space, you need to factor that space into each bag. Believe it or not, that's going to come into it because that's an expense. So my opinion is, try to start at home. If you have to use a commercial kitchen, that's fine. Keep in mind, though, how much you're spending at the commercial kitchen. Okay, number 5, shipping. So if you're going to make a product, unless you're delivering it to somebody, there's going to be a potential chance that you want to ship it. Now, if you're starting from home, of course, cottage food law says you can't ship a product. I'm only going to give you a couple of these little tips here, 5, 6, and 7, in regards to potentially shipping it if you are in a commercial kitchen, okay? So the cost to ship your product, well, that's an expense. That's going to cost. Are you going to pass that on to the person buying it or the retail store that's buying it or the food distributor that's buying it? That's something you got to factor in. So keep in mind the shipping weight, the size of the box, and all of that, that's going to contribute to the cost of your overall product. Now, number 6 and 7 are very similar in regards to number 5. Shipping box. Remember, you also need to have a carton to ship the product in. Believe it or not, that's a cost, an expense, okay? So keep that in mind. Number 7, the case pack box. So you make the product, that's great, but you need to ship it in a actual box before you ship it in a case pack. So if you have this in some type of presentation, either a tray or carton that goes out onto a retail store shelf, keep in mind the case pack box, that's going to be inside of the shipping box, okay? So those 7 things have a gigantic factor to do with how much your product costs and helps you determine what's my wholesale. Then you need to figure out how many cases are you going to actually, how many products are you going to put into a case? 12 of them, 24 bags, maybe 36. Those are also a determinant to figure out how much you want to ship. Now, with the last 3, keep it in mind, overall cost of your food product is really number 1 through 4, okay? Because the labor, of course, down the road, which you got to factor in, labels and the packaging, and of course the ingredients. The main 3 are going to be your ingredients, the package, and the label. That produces your finalized product. But I threw in those extra couple in there in the end just to keep that in mind, because as you grow your business, they are going to be a factor and they're going to be important. So with that being said, I'll wrap it up. Those are the key things that you want to keep in mind when you're determining how much does it cost to create this, because I can't determine how to wholesale it unless I know my cost. So with that being said, I'll wrap it up and I'll see you guys on the next video.